may notice Catty in a different form. Pollyanna, who is our strategy director, often the thinker behind the thing, she said, hey, I will join you.
So hopefully we'll make it a good one.
Strategy directors are helping frame high-impact
The
marketing.
absolute key to any successful business.
The comments section is an insight goldmine.
Turn on your comments, you coward.
Weirdly, what's happening is that on TikTok, because of the way that the algorithm works,
Explain.
what I will say is that don't keep your Capri Suns in the fridge, keep them in the freezer.
Great answer. In this week's Memes and Machines, we show up a little differently. AI has transformed the Catman into Pollyanna. I'm joking. We have a guest appearance from a wonderful strategist and colleague, Pollyanna. We explore why brands need to turn their comments on, cowards. We also try and unpick why people are watching TV, linear TV, on TikTok. We talk about search, and is TikTok really a search engine, or does it have search capabilities? And there is a difference. There has been a meaningful update to the LinkedIn algorithm, and does this mean hashtags are finally dead? We also unpick X, formerly Twitter, and are the criticisms and boycott of the platform from the ad industry justified? The verdict is out. We conclude by sharing war stories and ranting about dumb things that companies do, but they shouldn't. And thank you to Pollyanna. Boom, boom, boom. This week's Memes and Machines, you may notice Catty in a different form. AI is getting hella good. No, I joke. I want to start with the backstory. So, one of the commitments that myself and Catty made with Memes and Machines is we would show up every week. You know, motivation will fluctuate, but discipline is something that we can control. And, you know, it's quite difficult to do anything on a weekly basis, particularly when you don't know what's going to happen in your life, the certain uncertainty. But the way we set up this entire podcast was to ensure that we had the lowest barrier to create, meaning we, you know, do this in a really simple format. We've gradually over time tried to increase the production value. We try and reiterate, learn, create a bit more formula, but we lower every barrier we can to mean we show up every week. And guess what happened? Catty had a Black Swan event. And for those who aren't familiar with a Black Swan event, it is the chaos that can just show up on your doorstep without you realizing, and it turns your world around. And his Black Swan event was an industry event. So right now, Catty for the last 2 days has been, as he would say, hands on keyboards, trying to figure things out. I actually think it will make a really interesting topic. I personally had my own mini crisis. I've lost my adapter, which means I don't have a microphone, so I'm speaking directly into laptop. Luckily, we have AI to fix that. And I just found out that I lost my glasses. I was going to put my glasses on to try and come across a little more intelligent. And I can't find them. And you know when you have something and you don't know where you placed it, it sends your mind into chaos. So I'm having my own mini existential crisis. And then, to top it off, time is running out to record the podcast. So I decided I was going to do a solo podcast where I just rant about predictions for 30 minutes, not knowing how that would turn out. But then, as I was ending the workday, one of my partners in crime at Flight Story, Pollyanna, who is our strategy director, often the thinker behind the thing, the tinkerer, the great mind that is Pollyanna, she said, hey, I will join you. So here we are. Pollyanna is our first outside person replacing Catty for this week's Memes and Machines. So, Pollyanna, thank you so much for jumping in and saving the day and saving the audience from hearing me rant for 30 minutes on a monologue.
No, thank you very much for having me. Yes, this feels a little bit like a one night only show. So hopefully we'll make it a good one.
We will make it the best. Catty, you know what? I think you should raise the bar. So Catty has to go not from 0 to 1 as he likes to rant on about, not hands on keyboards, but he goes from 1 to 2. That's what we're trying to do here.
I think we're sort of fast tracking his development now. This is the throwing into the deep end.
You heard it here first, Catman. You're going to have to step up your game. Okay. What I would love to do in this episode is, for anyone that isn't aware, Pollyanna has had an extensive career. Do you want to give us just kind of the 2-minute life story of your career and your experience, and then we'll dive into some fun topics?
Ooh, okay, story of my life. So I think the best way to sort of crystallize my career so far, and I think this is something that everyone always told me that I did it the wrong way round. You're apparently supposed to start in agency and then maybe bumble about in a publisher or some sort of tech company, and then you retire. And I say that in inverted commas, retire in-house to the brand side. But for me, I love brands. I'm probably the biggest brand lover in terms of buying branded products, whether it's FMCG or anything else. So I've always loved them. And I actually spent the majority of my career in-house. And I think now, having been agency side for the last probably 3-4 years now, what I find really interesting is that I think that's my advantage. And I use that as like my edge. So whereas previously having to sort of pitch internally for finance or put together proposals for what you're going to do with your marketing calendar for the year and rely and work with your sparring partner, your agencies, to help you bring that story to life. Now, sitting on the other side, it's really interesting now to sort of see and lift the lid on, oh, so that's what they meant when it was this, or okay, that's why it takes a week, not an hour to get something over the line. So it's quite eye-opening, and I'm obviously very much enjoying the ride. And now I'm at Flight Story. So I guess that's a bit of me, really.
I love that. I want to unpick a question that is debated all the time from someone who's lived both sides of the proverbial in-house agency coin. Controversial, but which is harder and which is more fulfilling?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I'm going to give the sort of diplomatic answer, which is that there's pros and cons to both. And I think it would be, sort of a bit too simplistic to say that one was better than the other. What I will say is that the things that I learned in-house are probably things that maybe I might not have learned as fast in an agency environment. And what I mean by that is things like financials, commercials, some of the other P's in marketing. I think I probably would never have, not never, but it would have taken me a little bit longer to get there. On the flip side, what I am absolutely, and why I chose to switch to agency side almost, was that hive mind. It's like I have had a supercharged diet of every industry going, whereas before, you're sort of in one industry and that's your bubble. So I think in terms of where I am in my career right now, working in strategy where every day has a different challenge and a different problem, right now being in an agency environment as a strategist is really fulfilling because we had this conversation earlier, but I get paid to think, and I love that, and read and digest and put together and join the dots. So I think for where I am right now, I will say agency, but never say never.
Great answer. Agency is exactly what. No, you know what? I think I'm a big believer of when you go through a career or any experience, you steal a piece of that experience. You steal a piece of those around you. And when you have worked in any environment, you having empathy for what marketeers in-house go through and understanding the constraints that they work under, understanding the processes, will give you so many advantages when you're collaborating and working directly with them. I think my observation of in-house and agency is the variety of challenges you attempt to solve as a strategist in an agency is so vast and varied that no 2 days are the same. In-house, though, the ability to see projects through on a sustained basis and work towards longer-term goals is equally rewarding in a different way. And I tend to view your point as there are generally no binaries. There are just different. So
Exactly.
maybe we sit on the fence. But I did like to say that you're enjoying being in an agency. That's welcome to my ears in a selfish capacity.
No, only good things.
Fair enough. Okay. You are a contributor to a leading publication. I believe it's the second specialist marketing publication, the leading in the world, which is The Drum. And you're often writing really insightful, I'm going to say original takes in marketing. I think you're a great writer. So I want to read back to you some of the headlines which you wrote, and I want you to firstly explain what you meant by those headlines, and then let's debate them. So I'm gonna go with my favorite first. Kick this off.
Okay.
You wrote a headline that said, "Turn on your comments, you cowards." Explain.
So what I will start by saying is I have a fantastic editor at The Drum, so I will give a shout out to John McCarthy. He absolutely prods and pokes to figure out what's got my goat this week or what's ground my gears this week, and I say it with love because I don't really mean that brands are cowards, of course, but of course I've got to get those headlines, got to get those clicks, and it works. But what was going on here was basically I saw on LinkedIn, as is always the way, an ad was doing the rounds. People were talking about it. It was on TikTok, and it had all the ingredients of this great social video, right? It was a person like head on straight to camera, like beckoning the viewer into the experience. Again, all the right ingredients of social, text overlays, there was scene changes, there was even a really cool branded effect, like if you press the button, lots of things bubbled across the screen. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible advert. Everyone was debating it and discussing it and sharing it. And then I kind of like clicked on the ad myself to go and see it in its natural habitat, and it just didn't, the comments were turned off. And I think there's always a natural sort of affinity as someone in the industry. You're kind of going, oh, does people like it? What did they do? How many likes did it get? Or did anyone comment on it? Or does everyone hate it? Or is the brand getting involved? What are you doing? But they turned the comments off. And I just thought, this is meant to be, it was for a film. This is meant to be one of the biggest films of 2024. It's got quite a bit of debate behind it anyway, because, and I'm not going to give it away because I don't think it's fair, but it is a reboot of a very popular film franchise. And so I kind of thought, oh my gosh, this is the new generation that are going to experience this. I wonder what the TikTok generation thinks, like to get their take. And they turned them off. And I think there's several reasons why they turned them off, and I'm sure you'll probably ask me why in a moment, but it was that moment of, well, what the hell? Like, you've put all this effort in on a social ad, and then you've turned off the very thing that makes it social. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'm not even going to debate you on this one, and I tell you why. Because I think the framing in the headline of being a coward, I think that's true. The one thing about whether you're an individual, whether you're a company, whenever you broadcast something into the internet, you will receive feedback. And when you receive good feedback, that's great. When you receive negative feedback, you probably should listen. I think great brands today are highly self-aware. And unless you encourage feedback or create platforms and spaces to receive feedback, you will never meet your obligations of improving and delivering. So first and foremost, I think that's the prime example. I assume some large notable film studio has a policy, and that policy was enacted, and it limits, everything that's great about marketing. So I loved that headline because I think it's a great headline. I agreed with the sentiment. My question to you is, if you were within an organization and you were having to build a business case for why you should leave your comments on and not fear the troll, the occasional troll, or not fear the potential backlash, what would your business case be?
So, for anyone that's heard me ramble before, in anything you've seen on LinkedIn, I always tend to have three things, and I think that was the way that I sort of approached this. Because, to your point, I thought I can't just write an article ranting. I have to give some sort of tangible takeaway. But the first thing that came to mind was the comments section is an insights goldmine. This is literally like an endless stream on TikTok, right, of off-the-cuff shower comments. I've seen some really amusing ones that I always screenshot and then I'll share them to LinkedIn being like, here's what I've seen out in the wild. I put some screenshots in the article, so I'll read a couple of these. Someone had commented underneath another video. I reminded mine that just like relationships, if people are speaking up, it's because they still care. If they're silent, the ship of hope has sailed. Now imagine, I don't know, that little nugget there. If you're a company that's talking about relationships or bonds or dating or love, that's a creative idea, probably just bubbling up, waiting to happen. There's another one which was, again, probably a little bit more amusing, but it was 18 to 25s are constantly asked for ID in the shop because you've got to be 16 to buy those energy drinks. So now, younger people now have to carry around ID, which is, again, quite amusing. And also, if you were a popular energy juice drink, probably by two creators who laugh in the face of sort of rules and regulations, that right there could be an amusing video. They could start making fake, cool IDs for young people to have to prove that they can buy that energy drink. Not endorsing that at all. But, in the comment section is just where there's all these random sparks of thoughts and ideas. And I call out two examples here. The first one is Capri Sun. Absolutely incredible TikTok. They've got an awesome mascot that dances around, taps into trends, really speaks to that younger audience. They noticed that people were commenting underneath with like links to like their own TikTok feeds or like just their own suggestions, going in the summer, oh, don't keep your Capri Suns in the fridge, keep them in the freezer. So Capri Sun responded, put the Capri Suns in the freezer, filmed them, they froze, you cut off the top and then you peel down the side, it turns into an ice lolly. It got over 1 million views within 24 hours. Insane. And then there's another example as well in the beauty category. We've got Elf Cosmetics, a whole series with their head of R&D literally responding to comments. Again, million after million of views. So I think that was really the main point I wanted to drive forward was, okay, even if there's some things that you don't want to hear, you might be sat on your next creative idea, let's say.
And both are equally as important, right? If you receive feedback, positive or negative, that is a signal to listen and respond. Doesn't mean your response is necessarily reactionary, but a response can be if our customers are saying a certain thing or we miss the tonality of a message or a piece of content. That's okay. That's useful, and that's the only way that you're going to improve as a function, as a creative function, as a marketing team, etc. Okay, there was another headline that I really loved that you wrote, and I don't remember the exact headline, but it was basically, why the fuck are people watching TV on TikTok? Explain.
Yeah, again, another great headline. That was actually from a WhatsApp exchange that I had, again, with my lovely editor, John, where I think my original headline was a little bit more tame and was a bit boring. And it was very much a jokey, let's throw in a swear word and see what happens. So here we go. But essentially, we've actually got quite a lively Slack channel at Flight Story, which is brilliant. It's called Ever Changing Landscape, and everyone shares in stuff that's happening, like whether it's new feature updates or it's even new shows that are coming up that are doing something different. Like, how do we, sort of stay at the forefront of what's possible is by keeping updated. Someone shared in there Peacock, which are a streaming service. They're based in the US. They'd uploaded full TV episodes onto TikTok, not just like clips, but full on, like they were 40 plus sort of TikToks worth playlists with TV series in them. And I was kind of wondering, well, what is actually happening here? And there was this great meme. It has Kim Kardashian. She's lying in bed on her phone. And someone has like captioned it with like, watch an entire movie in one go. Absolutely not. Watch it split up into 53 parts on TikTok. Absolutely yes. And it's kind of pointing to this new behavior that's kind of emerging where TikTok is essentially, it's the new water cooler moment. I think of office conversations, right? And I'm sure people listening will be familiar with this, but how many times do you you're chatting to your colleagues and then you're going, oh, did you watch Yellow Jackets? And they're like, oh, no, I didn't. And then they're like, oh, but did you watch Love Island? And you're like, oh, no, I didn't. No one is watching the same thing because there's about 8 different streaming services, box sets, whatever it is, TV licenses. But no one's watching the same thing. But then weirdly, what's happening is that on TikTok, because of the way that the algorithm works, it is pulling you in to whether it's just teaser clips of something or it is just showing you. I mean, I've watched entire episodes of Airline purely through TikTok. It's built for you, and so you're sort of sucked in and you watch it because you're thinking, well, it is for me, so I am going to watch it, and you get sucked down that rabbit hole. And I talked to a couple of other points and give some examples in the article if anyone wants to. I'm sure it will be in the show notes at the bottom after this is aired. But yeah, that was kind of the inspiration, really, was just going down the rabbit hole of what is going on.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's so much to unpick there as you were walking through your inspiration. And in part, I'm the biggest believer that the environment dictates how we all behave. There's many psychological studies that will show the environment will always beat intention. So our intention is not to go on TikTok and watch a film or watch a long form video, but the environment over time will dictate that. And as you were describing that, I think it's very smart for a company like Peacock to offer up that value, because in a classic funnel sense, you can introduce people to Peacock simply through kind of shows that you've probably got the rights to in a meaningful way and reboot, or there's value in those shows in licensing them, or they're completely owned, however the commercial arrangements are. I tend to think that that's a new way that IP owners have to think about their distribution mechanics. Long gone are the days where everything's gated and guarded. You need things that are free, and then you have value behind your paywall. And that can just be like one show. You know what I mean? That thing that everybody will actually pay for.
Well, I think one of the things that sort of came up through my travels was that by uploading these clips, whether they're new or old, if you think about sort of traditional sort of advertising of, let's say, Netflix or Disney or any of those things, there's the very standard done and dusted approach, the traditional approach of sign up and get the first month free, or sign up and get the first 3 months free. So how do you now, that's not going to drive any more hype. That's been done and dusted now. Everyone is very familiar with that. In fact, Peacock probably also offer that as well. Yeah. But what about if there was literally a try before you buy in the space where someone is already spending, on average 90 minutes a day? Imagine, if you're already there uploading, whether it's your best bits or full-on episodes, it's not going to take away from the TV experience. In fact, they'll go there, they'll check the comments if it's something that they're interested in. People are in the comments, they're shipping certain couples. They're talking about, could someone link me to the next scene? You find your tribe, you find your community. And I spoke earlier about that water cooler moment where you don't have that in the office anymore because everyone's watching, a million different things. But actually, if you can go on TikTok and have that community and that conversation, and then you go and download Peacock, Disney, whichever of those streaming services it is, to go and finish it off, it's sort of it closes the loop quite neatly, I think.
Yeah, it reminds me when you're walking through that example. Firstly, I go, as a marketing strategy, probably highly effective, right? And then the second part of me, it takes me back to previously when we would do work with around show launches or between album drops, working with entertainment companies. And one of the things that we often tried to do was kind of these pre-release moments where we would work with faceless influencers, think of them as communities or meme pages, and we would give them a view on a particular show in advance, and then we'd do a coordinated effort with them to talk about the show on the release date, because they could pre-curate content because they knew what was coming up in the episode that hasn't aired. So like when you combine, spaces, old seasons, you can imagine there's a new season of, I don't know, Netflix. What's coming up that's really popular? I don't know. There's another season of Making a Murderer. Why wouldn't they drop some of the iconic moments in totality or seed people reactionary content that people can binge? I actually think there's a lot that IP owners could do to create hype and momentum around shows and programming.
I almost thought enough is done. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I think when social media was newer, I believe people were a lot more maybe growth hacky in how they use social media. Now, because it's more in everybody's face, everybody's adopting, I think we're maybe even getting complacent to not think about some of these tactics that you can do around programming or shows or events or different things like that.
I was going to say that you mentioned IP there and IP owners. I think there's always going to be, and I can't speak to, I'm not the expert on it, but there's always going to be some sort of copyright or probably some sort of regulations, rules, especially around audio or maybe certain actors and actresses who have certain contracts in place. But if we just removed all of the complexity of legal things and imagine, if you've got the IP of, let's say, House of the Dragon new series is coming out next year. The trailer, the teaser just dropped yesterday when we were recording this. Incredible. Already doing numbers on social. You can imagine now you could sweat every single of the previous series on TikTok right now. Even think bigger. Go on YouTube Shorts. Go on Instagram Reels. Spread that seed, because once it starts picking up momentum, that's just going to snowball and get everyone hyped up for, I think we've got to wait until summer next year. You've got to keep that hype going. But it sort of points to a couple of things for me, which is I feel like sometimes if you work on the brand, and maybe this speaks back to the beginning of the episode where we spoke about, being brand side or agency side, but when you work on a brand, you get more sick of your brand quicker than a customer. Or just an average Joe. So I always think, you've already posted the trailer once. Post it 64 more times, cut up in 10 different ways. Because trust, it's going to find someone else. And I think that pointed to one other thing I called out in the article. But I was in Athens, very fortunately, earlier this year for a talk. But there was someone else on stage, and they spoke about how they've been playing around with, they create loads of different TikToks. And then push them all out from their page to test out all the different hooks, the different thumbnails, different audios, all of those things. And they don't worry about whether it's going to increase the frequency or people are going to get annoyed, because they know that the TikTok algorithm is going to send that one that starts with someone holding up a cat. They're going to send that video to someone completely different, to someone who's there face to camera about to, I don't know, tell a joke, for example.
Well, yeah, it's what we talk about a lot. Social media has evolved from a linear set of channels to an ecosystem. And it's actually more important. If you think of a brand, they typically focus so heavily on their own channels. They put all their efforts and resource on content, but really it's about what happens around your brand, the conversations, who's co-creating with you, how your brand's telling its story through the lens of creators, through customers, through communities, how you're showing up in comments. It's now such an ecosystem around us. And when as you were describing that process, my mind went immediately to something that I am seeing a lot of creators talk about. These are creators that specialize in growth. So their entire content strategy is built around them telling other people that want to grow social channels how to grow. That's their thing. And one of the tactics I keep hearing is, I'm going to set up 20 social media channels and I'm going to do 20 versions of the same story with a slightly different hook and a slightly different, edit and a slightly different story. And I'm going to see which of those gains traction. Because the reality is, within a TikTok environment, your following has no bearing on how many people you reach, but it has a much lower impact on who you can reach and who can be seen. The key is hitting the algorithm, hitting that For You wave and being served to that niche community at scale. So actually, if I go a step further and go, okay, well, smart creators are recognizing that their channels are less relevant, right? But what is relevant is their ability to catch the viral algorithm, to catch the For You page. I do wonder if brands start actually thinking in those terms of like, I'm now going to launch 20 channels and I'm going to distribute different messages on each of those challenges. And those 20 channels can maybe represent my various themes and content pillars. And I'm going to find my algorithm. 20 is probably being a little crazy for a brand, and I'm being hyperbolic. But there probably is merit in even each, we spent so long advising companies on social media to not create new channels because new channels needed to be resourced, you needed to create content. But as now the barrier to create content and the ease of production and post-production, as that barrier has been lowered, maybe now the right solution in an ecosystem-based social landscape as opposed to a channel-based, maybe the right answer is to have like 5 to 10 different pages. And whenever you say anything in the world, you do 5 to 10 different variations. And that's probably how you earn attention and maximize your organic reach.
I think there's two things you've sort of prodded there. Because I think on the one hand, I'm going, okay, this sounds like a lot. And my cynic says, the sort of evil chimp on maybe my right shoulder is sort of going, the platforms are encouraging creators to make more content because they need more inventory to run their ads. That is where my sort of cynical side goes, which may or may not have merit. Some people may agree or disagree. Come at me in the comments. The left chimp is going, actually, yes, we went through a really big period, probably around, I feel like the big number was like between 2012, 2015, there was this sort of, oh my goodness, organic reach, amazing. Then we hit a sort of, no, it's pay to play. The platforms are all penalizing you. But now what's happening is that because of the role of creators in today's world, so when I talk about organic, I don't mean brands churning out pictures of their products on an Instagram page. When I talk about organic, I think of creators creating content for you, UGC, like publisher content, all of that sort of stuff that tells a story around your brand that sort of matches up to where the consumer is in a customer journey. Yes, okay, it's not going to have the reach, but your Instagram page or your TikTok page is part of the customer journey. 40% of young people are going to your TikTok page, well, not your TikTok page specifically, but they're going to social to search about a brand, a product, to get advice. So with that in mind, if you're trying to get at the head of the curve for the future generation who may be 100% searching for the answers on TikTok or whatever new social channel is going to be there in the future, but if they're searching for the answers on social, suddenly the role for what content your brand has out there becomes really, really important. And so now I feel like I'm sort of changing my view on the role of organic now, where I'm like, okay, yeah, it might not be relevant for every brand and not, no one needs to have loads of advice about toilet paper. But for some categories, actually testing and learning now to get ahead in the future feels like a really good strategy.
Yeah, I agree. And the way you describe, the once walled gardens that were organic activity, earned activity, paid activity, those those walls have been brought down in a really significant way. You mentioned something there. You used the word search and young people. One thing I keep hitting my feeds is TikTok is a search engine. It's been propagated by how people are behaving. And I actually use TikTok to search for certain things in my life. I use ChatGPT for other things, and I use Google for many other things. They're all playing a role in my life personally. And then I read a really interesting take this week from someone, I believe, who works I think he may work in a search agency. And the take was, TikTok is not a search engine. Let me prove it. And he went and typed in timber in Manchester. And if you think of search as a buying habit, it's actually less useful. It's search in the way that, in my view, in the way that Pinterest is search, when you're in a buyer's mindset. I am going on holiday to Mykonos. I want to find out about Mykonos trips. I want reviews on a specific product, but I know what product I'm looking for. Maybe you will get there. But there is still a disconnect when we use very broad statements like TikTok is now a search engine because lots of people are searching for things. I think we're conflating two things. Lots of people are using TikTok to discover in the same way you go to YouTube to discover something specific. But you're not using search, or search still has a very specific role around buying habits. So it's maybe the wrong framing to say TikTok is a search engine, but TikTok is embedding more search capabilities and creating order in the chaos that maybe once hashtags occupied.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think not necessarily a hot take, but in a similar vein, I seem to remember talking to someone about that, it's not going to work for every category. Categories where you need to consider, thinking of birthday parties, work outfits, what hair products to get. I clearly need some anti-winter hair products today. Those ones where you're kind of needing to get reviews and get a second opinion, I think is where social platforms play a role in the search journey, because you're looking to get, literally be influenced by somebody, right? You're kind of hoping that someone has been there, got the t-shirt, they're showing you on camera and going, use this product or go to this place in Mykonos because, POV, day in the life of a day in Mykonos. Whereas for things where, to your point, a search engine in the space and in the realm of I want to buy a product today, and I'm quite happy to go on a grocer to go and look at that, or even just pinpoint me to a blog so I can read about it and check it out. I think where you don't want to be influenced by someone, maybe that's a way to think about it.
Yeah,
they're probably better words.
Yeah, and look, I pay a lot of attention to macro data, and I really try and analyze trends, and I think this increasing converge of search and social has been interesting. It's one of the things where Pinterest had an identity crisis, and maybe still does. For the longest time, it was a visual search platform, but called itself a social media platform. It's never been a social media platform. It's always been a visual search, but they wanted to play in the space of Instagram and play in the space. And actually TikTok's come along and just acts as this almost that's just merged every possible social platform into this place.
It's just hoovering all the features up.
I call it a Trojan horse because it was once, for a long time, very much trivialized. Whenever we look at things that are adopted by young people, the next generation, we're always very dismissive. The world is dismissive of the things that young people do. But yet young people drive every wave of innovation, every meteoric shift, every trend. They drive culture. And actually, as a consequence, you realize that young people have an unfiltered, untarnished view of the world. And it's actually pay attention to young people, how they're behaving, what they're doing, and you will probably safeguard your brand and your business, right?
No, absolutely.
I love it. On that topic, we did mention search. I noted there's been a LinkedIn algorithmic update. And what's basically happening now on LinkedIn is the role of hashtags is evolving. LinkedIn's algorithm has been updated. Previously, you would use an hashtag to categorize your content. And people could follow specific hashtags. And based on things you were interested in, you would be consistently served or be served content within that category, right? What's happening now to surface into the kind of topical current affairs arena, you no longer need hashtags. The algorithm will pick up and categorize your content for you. So my question becomes, are hashtags finally dead? Are they dead? They once created order on the internet. Now it feels like the algorithm is smart enough not to need hashtags to create order. What do you think?
Well, I think in terms of, it's quite amusing really, because it's quite an irony to the previous statement, which is, people laugh, trivialize what young people do. But there was a point where when I was coming into the world of marketing, hashtags were all the rage, to the point where you could literally get potato smileys in the shape of hashtags. And people had them tattooed on them. Hashtags were obviously the bomb. Now it's kind of really cringe. I'd be interested to know how widespread that update goes, because I think there's something that really does bother me a little bit, is when people do that thing where they're typing a normal sentence and then every other word is hashtagged, and that for me kind of killed the whole point of it.
Well, look, that LinkedIn have just put a stop to that ludicrous behavior, and you're right. I remember periods of time where brands would show up in the world, put an hashtag in front of their campaign slogan, and suddenly that was a social campaign, just because they categorized it. That was as far as most brands went to be social for hashtag. So I say kill the hashtag. It no longer serves a purpose, and I'm not upset about it.
No, and I also think that, again, coming back to that TikTokification of TV, previously, if you're watching Gogglebox or you're watching Killing Eve or Love Island or whatever, they have a hashtag that you can follow during the show. Now that X, also known as Twitter, no longer as much of a positive social space in some circles, depending on how your feed is doing and how you've curated it. But for many people, they've obviously left and gone over to Threads. So with that in mind, it's kind of like the whole role of it's a bit redundant. And like you say, technology is moving forward, it's shifting. If the machines can read your posts and know, oh, okay, contextually they're talking about brand or they're talking about TikTok, kill them. I'm not going to miss them. Although we'll probably just use them ironically now.
It's going to become a joke. It will be and actually everything will cycle. So at some point we will use them in a nostalgic vein, just to bring people back to a simpler time. You said something there. You mentioned X and said it's no longer a safe space for some, or it's maybe not as relevant to certain groups of people. Give me your take on X. Catty and I discuss it a lot, and I think my personal experience, I've never been a prolific Twitter user. I will use it for current affairs, and I follow certain journalists. I follow certain contrarians deliberately to try and stay on the pulse of culture. What's your experience with X, and do you think the criticisms from the ad industry are justified?
So I have a real soft spot for, and I'm going to call it Twitter because that's what it is. I think that's it. Fun fact, though, for anyone listening, I did a talk recently on sustainability for a client, and we were talking about sustainability in media planning and what are some things they can do as quick wins for their brand. one of the things that you can do is, for any brands listening who are thinking, how do I be a little bit more sustainable? You switch your website to dark mode. I talked about some case studies, etc. And this is a topic for another time, but there was some brand examples where they'd switched to dark mode, or gave consumers the option to switch to dark mode, saying that it would save X amount of tons of CO2 every year if everyone collectively switched to dark mode. Someone then said to me that was the reason why Twitter, the logo on the phone is black. It's a white X with a slight crack in it or whatever. Like, it's just the lowest phi logo that you could ever come up with, apparently, and it's all in the name of sustainability. So maybe that's a redeeming factor.
I love these like random stories and facts that I will never verify, and I am going to go on to regurgitate that fact with no validation. And I will speak it with such conviction that whoever I tell it to will probably think, well, that's an interesting fact. But I like the story, so.
There we are. But Twitter, aka X, I was on it since like the day that it started. And for example, when I was at university, Twitter was how we communicated with each other. Like, Instagram was kind of a thing, but it was very much like very bit artsy, very hipstery. And yes, I did jump on the Instagram wave a bit later on, but Twitter for me, I got it. Like, that was my jam. And that was literally, you'd post on Twitter like, hey, is anyone going to blah, blah, blah club tonight? And then you'd get people responding like, yeah, we're going. So I feel like my Twitter was amazing because it was a group of us who've all been in social since 2000 and whatever year it was. And then similarly to you, I do use it to follow things that I don't typically I wouldn't do on any other platform. So yes, some contrarians, even just like alternative news, again, just to try and diversify my feed, as well as just people working in completely different industries, like just following people that have got Bored Ape Yacht Club in their profile picture. I don't know much of what they're talking about, but I feel like it's going in via osmosis in some way. So I think I've curated my profile pretty well. What I'm sad about is that a lot of the people that I did follow on there from an industry perspective have left. And I understand why they've left. And I really struggle with threads. There's something missing. I don't know what it is. I thread on there and the thread is not threading. Whereas on Twitter, I can still get a pretty decent bit of engagement going. So I still use it, yes. But the amount of knowledge I now get from it, definitely not as much. And now I kind of consider LinkedIn to be my work platform, and Twitter is now just whoever's left.
So your experience has been dampened because people that you admire and some of the kind of creators have, exited the platform in protest. Is that a fair assessment? But you haven't noticed a particular like negative experience or a changing algorithm that you don't like or anything of that nature?
I can't tell if you did that, like exited.
You know what? I'm higher than have a Barnsley accent, so I think that's more likely. It would have been smart if I did. I'm not that sharp.
I'd probably say it would be a bit ridiculous. It's probably just like, when someone says something, you sort of notice it. I wouldn't have noticed. If I think of my partner, for example, science Twitter is very much alive and well, and they tweet all the time to their science community. So I think for the average person, it probably doesn't really feel that different. But I think because it was so close to our industry and we're sort of seeing a lot of it, I feel like I've definitely noticed a few people that I used to engage with, like they've left, and that's fine. I see them on LinkedIn, but I'm sure for the average person, I probably haven't noticed.
Yeah, I tend to think there's a huge amount of hypocrisy in the advertising industry, and I believe people that are value-centric and take a stand and take actions based on their beliefs, I applaud them. But what I tend not to applaud is the hypocrisy. I saw several people leave, but then say, like, I'm going to stay here because I have this massive audience, and I'm going to, like, just tweet less. I was like, if you're gonna exit, if you're gonna, take a stand, don't dip your toe in and like go. but I want you all to follow me. Like, come on. I think that's disingenuous and goes against. And look, my personal opinion, I'm not a fan of, boycotting the platform for Elon. It's interesting. I sometimes feel uncomfortable in a public forum speaking about Elon in a positive way because so many people are triggered by just the word Elon. And because I can like or admire aspects of any human doesn't mean I like every aspect or agree with every opinion. It's in the same way that I would describe it as people I know are obsessed with like serial killer documentaries. That doesn't mean that I judge them or have a signal that they may take a different path in life that is rooted with crime and killing, right? I don't need to attach. I can appreciate things for what they are and disagree with many other things. And I don't like this idea of this immediate allergic reaction to Elon because he is a contrarian. He's also a incredible mind. He also is a controversial figure. He also says stupid, dumb shit. He also does he's human. He's imperfect. So yeah, I tend not to like this reaction and I'm going to go away with it, but then disingenuously kind of want to stay attached. But that's my take. And I think the ad industry is one of the most guilty of any industry to take virtuous stands that are full of hypocrisy. I speak a lot about this in kind of sustainability, where, if you're close to the soil, you will see people boycott a certain agency because they work with an oil business. And I go, okay, are you going to boycott them when they work with the aviation industry or car manufacturers or, all of these other contributors? I think we need to create some continuity. Anyway, that is my rant. I don't want to leave on a negative, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's how we said we'd frame this conversation. You were telling me a story before we jumped on about something silly that you observed from a company today. So I want you to share your story, and we're going to call this segment Dumb Things That Companies Do But Shouldn't. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I don't know why it bothered me so much, but I can actually hear the man's voice in my head, being just outraged / gobsmacked. So over the weekend, you won't believe it, but I live in Liverpool. Accent absolutely gives it away. It was -3 degrees up there. We've got the sea breeze, and weirdly it snows, but it doesn't settle because you've got the salt in the air. So you've got quite an interesting environment to navigate where it's super windy from the sea. That it is snowing, but it doesn't settle. So it's just cold, salty air. Anyway, I was in a shop. Walk in, there's a greeter at the door. When the door opens, they welcome you in. Hi, how are you? Let us know if you need anything. I walk in, all good, thank you very much. Man walks in behind me, and the person standing at the door is a young woman. She is wearing just a t-shirt. You look around, all the staff members are wearing these t-shirts. They're all the same. Guy at the till's got one, person at the fitting room's got one. And I just heard the man behind me as I was browsing through the shelves. He was like, "Are you okay?" Because this poor woman was absolutely frozen solid by the door. Every time it opened and closed, she had to stand there and go, "Have a great day. Let us know if you need anything." All with a smile, but you could see she definitely wanted to cry. And she goes, when he asked her if she was okay, she said, "Oh no, it's fine." And he was like, "Do you want a jacket or something?" And she was like, "Oh no, we can't. It's against company policy. We've all got to promote a new line of t-shirts that have come in, so we've all got to promote them." And you could just see, I turned around to see this interaction, and the guy, he was just, I'm not going to do the Scouse accent, but just imagine, or so, I don't know, go and look up and can't think of a Scouse bloody accent now. Whoever does one, Scouse accent, basically saying, if it's winter, why aren't you promoting coats? And it just seemed like one of those really obvious things where it was like, yeah, why aren't they? If the person standing at the door, why aren't they promoting coats? I just thought it was such an obvious thing where I just thought, who came up with this rule? Who decided in this freezing cold? It would probably be fine if it was further down south. Maybe it's 6 degrees. I don't know, but
you know what? This is why you should keep your comments on, because if that person pointed out the lunacy the silliness, and actually gave a very helpful recommendation, that business may have responded accordingly and acted better next time. So I think we'll conclude there. Thank you so much, Pollyanna. I love our debates in the office and when we're working through briefs and trying to unpick problems. I think you're a wonderful mind. And Catty's going to have to go from 2 to 3 next week if he survives his hands-on keyboard Black Swan event that's happened to him. And actually, I think we're going to unpick that next week. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you jumping in as our first outside guest appearance. I love it.
No, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully see you again.
See you again.